I spent a week this past summer on retreat with other clergy learning about contemplative Christianity. The first half of the retreat week was spent on Zoom at home in my living room, learning about spiritual practices and quieting the heart and mind in order to listen for the divine presence. The second half was spent at Bon Secours Retreat Center in Marriottsville, Maryland, in silence. During that second half of the retreat, participants entered into what was called the Great Silence. And during the Great Silence, those on retreat commit to spending 48 hours in silence. The practice of removing myself from familiar surroundings such as home and church and going to the retreat center forced me to take notice and look around at my new surroundings. The practice of silence and not engaging other people in conversation also contributed to allowing me to take notice of the things around me because I wasn't focused on people. What did I see? I was awed by the beauty of nature and the pastoral setting of the retreat center. Every day, you and I see insects, deer, birds, rocks. But while on silent retreat in this new and beautiful setting, the insects, deer, bird, and rocks became monarchs feasting at the butterfly bush. A fawn skipping behind doe and buck. Bluebirds in abundance, koi and goldfish flecking the pond with gilded shine. Hawks making lazy circles in the sky, and stones creating a path on which to tread lightly and contemplate the meaning of it all. Nature came alive, and the beauty of it engulfed me. I saw everyday things such as insects, deer, fish, birds, and rocks for the very first time, or with new vision, with faith glasses. In the gospel reading from Mark that Linda just read to us, in Mark 10, the son of Timaeus, Bartimaeus, is a blind beggar who sits by the roadside. We can imagine that we encounter Bartimaeus in this reading in his regular spot, that same place in which he finds himself day after day begging for daily provision. When Jesus walks by, Bartimaeus sees things that others don't. Bartimaeus is jostled out of his regular routine. He has the opportunity to engage with Jesus, and he knows this is his time. This is his chance to see more clearly. So Bartimaeus jumps at the chance and calls out to Jesus. Others around him did not necessarily see that this was Bartimaeus' moment, and so they sternly order him to be quiet. They want him to stay in the same spot. They don't want him to make a scene. Blind Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was not going to let this moment pass, and so he cried out even more loudly to the Lord. He knew he needed Jesus and his mercy. When Jesus summoned him, the text says the beggar threw off his cloak, sprang up, and went to Jesus. And Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" Isn't that a great question? What do you want me to do for you? Jesus doesn't say, "Let me tell you what you need." Jesus doesn't say, "You need to do these 3 things." He doesn't even say, "Listen." as he so often says to his disciples in this gospel. Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" Blind Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, who, as we've said, already has a certain measure of sight, says, "Let me see again." He wants to be able to see more clearly than he is already able to see as a blind man. His desire is granted, and he follows Jesus. This is such an interesting passage because the blind man is already able to see in some ways. He knows that something is happening when Jesus passes by. He knows that he needs Jesus. He is unafraid to call out for help from Jesus. He tells Jesus clearly what he needs. He then becomes even more clear with what is needed from Jesus, and he becomes a Jesus follower. He may have been able to see the everyday insects, birds, fish, deer, and rocks, so to speak, before the great encounter with Jesus. But after that change, he sees beauty. He sees more clearly, and he becomes a disciple. It's stewardship season in the life of our community, or as we call it here at Potomac Presbyterian Church, generosity season. Our theme this year for generosity is taken from 2 Timothy 1, and it has to do with rekindling the gift of God that is within each one of us. The Apostle Paul writes to those he loves to remember the gift of faith that was passed on from the elders in the community, from grandmothers like Lois, from mothers such as Eunice, and reminds them to rekindle the gift of God, not through cowardice, but rather through a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. So what does this look like at PPC to rekindle the gift of God that is within each one of us? And what does this have to do with Bartimaeus and silent retreats? I'll try to help us see the connections. We are emerging from an extended period of trauma in our world, nation, church, and personal lives, having lived through the pandemic. We have all had to handle this pandemic in ways that are right for us. As far as how the pandemic has been handled at the church, we have chosen to not cower in fear, not tread water, nor just hope for the best. Instead, we have accomplished remarkable ministry successes during this crippling time that are worth celebrating. We have both in-person and online worship capability, as well as hybrid classroom capability. A matrix system has been set up in the education wing so that in every classroom on the lower level, the smart TVs can show live what's happening in the sanctuary. We have been able to keep up with 10% of the church budget going toward mission, service, and outreach, comprised of dollars sent to organizations and missionaries we partner with, as well as hands-on staff resources that are allocated toward mission involvement. These and several other ministry successes in 2020, 2021 have helped to keep us focused on caring for all with faith, hope, and love. These were accomplished with God's provision. In order for us to have been able to accomplish these and other successes, the staff, session, deacons, and you all stepped up and put in a lot of time, energy, faith, hope, and love. Many of the line items in our budget were cut so that we could present a balanced budget and focus on what we needed during the pandemic. When I look at all of the ways we have remained faithful to our mission and our call in 2021, I am able to see more clearly and with renewed vision the possibilities of what God can do through this community in 2022 going forward. Now that we have the technology to live stream, we need a digital outreach coordinator and specialist who can help us maintain and grow our online community, as well as help us with the basic Sunday tech needs and troubleshooting. As I said last Sunday, Chris has done a phenomenal job getting us to this point with our technology, but his call is not as a minister to the digital community only, but as a minister to and for youth education and mission. There are so many wonderful programs, ministries, and events happening here at the church, but the way that we are able to communicate all that's going on needs attention. And I would like to hire a communications and outreach specialist to help us get our light out from under a bushel, help us spread the good news of what God is doing in and through our church community. It took shifting locations and sitting in silence for me to see more clearly the beauty of the monarchs feasting at the butterfly bush, the fawns skipping behind the doe, bluebirds in abundance, the koi and goldfish flecked pond, the hawks making lazy circles in the sky, and the stones creating a prayer path. For Bartimaeus to see more clearly what he needed, it took jumping at the chance and not letting that opportunity pass, not letting others deter or derail him. He knew what he needed, and he was ready when Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus became a disciple. Here at the church, for our vision moving forward, it has taken a pandemic to help us see more clearly what we need. There are exciting possibilities when we put our faith glasses on, or put another way, when we rekindle the faith, the gift of God that is within each one of us. This is not easy work, but it's necessary. And we are asking for a significant financial increase from each one of us in order for us to move forward with these initiatives. As I said last week, Chris, Tom, Jean, Lindsay, and I are a great team. But one thing the pandemic has helped us to see is that we can't do it all. We need help. We are asking for an increase in giving this year of $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 or more to fund these growth initiatives that will require a minimum of a $100,000 increase in our budget. The new church officers, the elders and deacons that you elected, began their training yesterday. As a part of the training, each officer shares an abbreviated faith journey with the group as a way to begin to articulate how they see God at work in their lives and as preparation for writing a faith statement. One of the officers in training shared how he had been going through a rough patch. He was questioning his faith, wondering how God works, what it's all about. How do we understand faith when we have no tangible, reasonable, or accessible way to make sense of God? He had some helpful conversations with family on the topic over the years and over recent months. And those conversations moved him along the faith continuum. But he found he was still wrestling and struggling. Then his cat got into his bookshelf, which is filled with history books, because that's his area of interest, and he knocked down one of the books. Brad went to investigate to see what the noise was all about, and on the floor, he saw the book that had been knocked off the shelf by his cat. The title, The Reason for God, Belief in an Age of Skepticism. It spoke directly to the questions he had been mulling over at that time. He picked it up and began to reread the one theological book that he has on that particular bookshelf. And he thanked God for that reminder, using Pandora the cat, of how he could rekindle the gift of God that is within him and see more clearly. What change of scenery do you need so that you can see more clearly the beauty that's all around you? Jesus asks Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" What book needs to be knocked off your bookshelf? What needs to happen for you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you? What do you see? Thanks be to God. Amen.